Hello, I'm Dr. Mack Crayton III, author of Brain, Mind, Soul, and Spirit, the interface between science and scripture. I decided to present this video in light of the recent controversies with the repeal of the abortion laws here in the United States. There are many of you who stand strong in your convictions as pro-choice or pro-life supporters. Still, there are other Americans who don't really know where they stand on the spectrum in this belief. It is my hope that our reading from Brain, Mind, Soul, and Spirit today, actually chapter 4, entitled Alive and Living, will give insights into where you may fit on the spectrum. Again, Brain, Mind, Soul, and Spirit, the interface between science and scripture, found at DoransBookstore.com. It is fairly easy to look at an object and determine whether or not it is living. For example, is a granite tabletop living? Is the housefly that buzzed past your ear living? Is the shirt that you're wearing living? Is the pet that is watching you read this book living? These questions are pretty easy to answer. However, the level of difficulty increases in determining what is living when we consider whether a cold or flu virus is living. For these types of scenarios, we look to biological science for the definition of living organism, but find the definition to be complicated. Typically, there are 6 characteristics that an organism must possess in order to be considered living. These 6 characteristics include composed of 1 or more cells, able to reproduce, able to respond to environmental stimuli, able to grow and develop, able to use energy, and able to adapt to its environment. If an organism is or will be capable of all 6 of these characteristics at some point in time during its lifespan, it is considered to be a living organism. To answer our previous question, viruses are non-living because they do not possess all 6 characteristics at any point or time during their existence. These characteristics allow us to determine between inanimate objects and living organisms. Still, there remains a very challenging question within the medical community: what determines whether a human being is living or alive? For example, is a coma patient who is totally dependent upon life support alive? Is a 4-week-old fetus alive? Let's explore the mechanisms that we employ to determine if a human being is living or clinically alive. Brain activity is the definitive test to determine whether a person is clinically alive, meaning whether the soul and spirit are still actively present in the physical body. Again, consider a patient who has been unconscious for an extended period of time, weeks to months, yet still has brain or brain stem activity. This patient is said to be alive, but in a coma. However, a second patient who is also unconscious but has no brain activity or brain stem activity is completely dependent upon life support for basic bodily functions. This patient can be considered clinically dead. When measurable brain activity ceases, a person is considered brain dead. Brain death is defined as the irreversible loss of all functions of the brain, including the brain stem. The brain, spinal cord, and neurons, other nerve cells, make up our nervous system, which is divided into 2 parts: the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, and the central nervous system, the CNS. The ANS controls the autonomic or involuntary functions such as breathing, heartbeat, the dilation of our pupils of the eyes, and etc. These functions are primarily associated with the brainstem. The central nervous system controls voluntary functions such as movement, thinking, and consciousness, and are typically controlled by different lobes or areas of the brain. Brain activity is based upon measures from both the ANS and CNS to determine whether a patient is alive. The three determining characteristics of brain death are coma, i.e., unconsciousness, absence of brainstem reflexes, and apnea, not breathing. A patient determined to be brain dead is legally and clinically dead. Thus, we use measurable brain activity to determine whether the non-living physical soul and spirit are present or absent from the body. We'll skip over a little bit in the chapter onto page 39. So we have discussed and perhaps even agreed that upon our death, our spirit exits our body and returns back to God. Since our spirit has a discrete exit point from the physical body, then it stands to reason that our spirit has a discrete entry point into our physical body. This begs the question, when does the spirit enter the body? To make a linear argument for being alive, we will use the same medical criteria for brain activity that is standardly used to determine whether a living person is still alive or not, in order to predict when the spirit enters the body, i.e., when the body first becomes alive. As discussed earlier, our test method for determining whether a patient is alive is completely dependent upon brain activity, which includes consciousness and apnea. In order to investigate the entry point of the spirit, or the point at which we first become alive, we must look at fetal development and apply the same stipulations for brain activity. We will focus on brainstem activity, i.e., heartbeat, as an indicator of brain activity, since it is difficult to determine definitively consciousness in an early stage fetus. Also, we eliminate the criterion for apnea because we are aware that fetuses do not breathe in utero. Fetal development begins with the formation of a zygote, which is a single cell that results from the union of the sperm with an ovum or egg cell in the process of fertilization, also known as conception. The single-cell zygote undergoes rapid cell division, called cleavage, in order to progress through developmental stages such as the 2-cell stage, the 4-cell stage, the 8-cell stage, the morula, blastula, and gastrula stages. During the gastrula stage, the process of organogenesis begins. Organogenesis is the development process in which the 11 different organ systems of the body are formed. For example, the circulatory system, which includes the heart, veins, arteries, and blood. Another is the nervous system, which includes the brain, the spinal cord, and neurons or nerve cells, and is formed early during fetal development. As mentioned previously, the nervous system is divided into two parts, the ANS and the CNS. Brain activity is based upon measures from both the ANS and CNS to determine whether a patient is alive. Apnea is an indication that the ANS is not functioning, and a coma is an indication that the CNS is not functioning. Developmental biology and embryology are sciences that study the various stages of fetal development. These sciences support the ability to detect a fetal heartbeat by the 6th week of pregnancy, and recall that a heartbeat is indicative of brain activity, since heartbeat is controlled by the brain stem. Given that heartbeat is controlled by the ANS, heartbeat is a clear indicator that the brain, more specifically the brain stem, is functioning. Based upon the clinical definition, during the first 5 weeks of pregnancy, the fetal tissues are living. However, the fetus itself is not alive because the brain has not formed and there is no measurable brain activity during these weeks. If we take brain activity to be the measure for the presence of life, meaning the presence of the non-physical spirit and soul, then it appears that the spirit enters the body around the 6th week of pregnancy. The belief that our spirit possibly enters the body around the 6th week of pregnancy would be regarded as amazing to those who ascribe to biblical numerology. The number 6 represents man and his weakness. Also, in the creation story, God created man on the 6th day. The thought that the spirit enters the physical body during the 6th week of pregnancy aligns with the meaning of the number 6, representing man and the formation of human life. Still, this is simply another rubric to add to the plethora that have already been used to argue the question, when does life begin? From the vantage point of right to choose, early term abortions, those that occur within the first trimester, more specifically to this rubric, those that occur within the first 5 weeks, a pregnancy would be justified. During these weeks, the fetus is simply an actively dividing mass of cells that has no heartbeat, has no brain, cannot perceive pain, and thus have neither a spirit nor soul. However, this rubric supports existing arguments opposing late-term abortions, those that occur during and after the 2nd trimester. According to our rubric, using the entry point of the spirit and termination of pregnancy from week 6 onward would constitute terminating the life of a human being who is alive. Legally, this aligns with the definition of murder. During week 6, the neural tube closes, which indicates the formation of the brain, and brain activity is evidenced by the presence of a heartbeat. Remember, the coma patient who has been unconscious for an extended period of time, weeks to months, yet still has brain or brainstem activity, is regarded as being clinically alive. So, by this measure, brainstem activity in a fetus makes it alive. It would be disingenuous not to return to the biological definition of living things and the tenet that states that the organism must possess the capacity for the 6 characteristics of life. With this consideration, at conception, the fertilized human ovum or zygote has the capacity for all 6 characteristics of life and can be considered living, but not alive, because the soul and spirit have not yet entered the body or tissues. Further, we must consider the importance of the human body and tissues. In the United States, there are laws that govern the use of human organs and tissues, and also provide protection to the human body upon the death of an individual. These laws include the process of harvesting donor organs, and also the right to legally will or donate one's body to science upon death. Last, the following acts to a human corpse are punishable by law: sexual intercourse, dismemberment, and all forms of desecration. The laws of the United States place value on the human body and tissues even after the soul and spirit have departed from the body. Would it be unreasonable to place the same value on human tissues prior to the entry of the soul and spirit? After all, there are laws that govern the use of fetal tissues, which are the source of embryonic stem cells. For decades, aborted fetal tissues in the form of embryonic stem cells have been used in research studies to fight neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and spinal cord injuries. Clearly, fetal tissues are valuable and hold the potential to restore the health and mental abilities of countless humans. Could similar laws be applied to the dismemberment and or desecration of human fetal tissues during the first 5 weeks of pregnancy, despite the fact that the soul and spirit have yet to have the opportunity to enter? According to the biological definition of living things, human fetal tissues including the single-cell zygote, possess the capacity for the 6 characteristics of life, and therefore, by definition, are considered living. Still, we must understand that to institute legislation that completely bans abortion also means that research using embryonic stem cells would be halted, and cures that may come from this research, many that are already on the horizon, may never reach fruition. So that ends the chapter 4 in my book, Brain, Mind, Soul, and Spirit, that talks about life and living things, presenting arguments on both sides of the story for you who that may be in the middle and still trying to make your decision on where you stand on this issue, may gain some insights to the biology of it, as well as the spirituality side of life and living things. Again, I am Dr. Mack Crayton. This has been a reading from Brain, Mind, Soul, and Spirit, the interface between science and scripture. You can purchase this book online at Doran's Bookstore. And I'll put it here for you. So Doran's Bookstore, www.doransbookstore.com. Thank you for tuning in.